All right, so today we're going deep on Elon Musk. We've got like a mountain of articles and research here, even some listener notes. Seems like you really want to understand this guy. I mean, rockets, tunnels, all the tweeting,
It is a lot, yeah.
yeah. And who wouldn't be fascinated? It's like he's living in a different reality almost.
It's true, he's larger than life at this point, but with any public figure, there's always more to the story, right?
Right.
And we're going to try to get to that. All those complexities and contradictions.
Exactly. We've got a lot to unpack here. But I think we got to start with the big question. Elon's public image. Visionary entrepreneur, revolutionizing industries. But he's also like incredibly polarizing. Some people love him, others, well, let's just say they're not buying a Tesla.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So is it hurting his companies? All of this.
That's the question a lot of people are asking. There's this growing concern that his online persona, especially on Twitter, it's kind of overshadowing everything else he does every time he gets into it with someone online. Or says something controversial or shares a weird meme. It just ripples out and, people start to see his companies differently. Especially Tesla.
So like people don't want to buy a Tesla because they don't want to be associated with his views.
Exactly. It's not just a car anymore, it's a statement. And for a lot of people, that statement, it's just not one they want to make anymore.
Okay, so that's reputation, but are there actual, like, financial consequences to that?
Well, we're seeing some anecdotal evidence, like on social media, people saying they won't buy a Tesla because of Elon. Hard to say how much that's affecting actual sales. But investors are definitely paying attention. They're worried as his personal brand is becoming a liability for Tesla.
You'd think someone like Elon would be more careful online.
Yeah, you'd think. But he just seems so impulsive. Remember when he called that British cave diver, a pedo guy?
Oh, yeah, that was a choice.
Yeah, it was just unfounded and strange.
Do you think he's just out of touch? Like, he doesn't get how his words affect people?
I don't know. It's hard to say. He's obviously a smart guy. But there's this sense of, detachment, maybe. Like he's playing by different roles.
And that makes people question his judgment as a leader.
Right. And that brings us to the business side of things, like with SpaceX, for example. They've done amazing things, but they rely heavily on government contracts. And those contracts are based on trust reliability. All the things Elon doesn't always project.
So his behavior could jeopardize those contracts.
It's possible. Some government officials are already voicing concerns. If those concerns grow, it could affect funding and their ability to keep going with these projects.
That the stakes are pretty high.
Yeah.
And it's not just the government, right? Investors are worried too.
Absolutely. There's this feeling that Elon is becoming a distraction, like a liability even. All those online fights, the impulsive decisions, it's taking his focus away from running these companies.
So it's not just the image, it's the actual management.
Exactly. Some investors are saying Tesla would be better off without him, that it would stabilize the company in the long run.
Wow, that's a strong statement. But I guess you can't ignore all this evidence. So let's get into some specifics. I mean, the cave diver thing was just one example.
Right. There was that time he said he could power the entire U.S. with solar panels the size of Rhode Island. Energy experts were like, nope, not possible.
I remember that.
But it makes you wonder, about his grasp of these complex issues.
Yeah, it felt like oversimplifying things.
Exactly, and that kind of undermines his credibility.
And then there's the whole thing with his tweets affecting stock prices. It happens all the time. One tweet and the market goes crazy.
Right, and that's where things get legally tricky. He's been accused of stock manipulation, especially with Tesla and Dogecoin. Remember that funding secured tweet?
Oh, yeah, about taking Tesla private.
Yeah, that was a whole thing.
What even happened with that?
So it turned out the funding wasn't actually secured, and the tweet caused Tesla's stock to skyrocket, which led to an SEC investigation.
Ah, okay, the SEC.
Right, they regulate the stock market, prevent fraud.
So basically, he got in trouble for tweeting something false and manipulating the market.
Yeah, pretty much. He had to settle with the SEC, pay a fine, and step down as chairman of Tesla.
Wow.
He stayed on as CEO, though.
Still a pretty big deal. So his tweets have real-world consequences.
Absolutely. It's not just about the money. It's about market integrity. When someone like Elon can tweet and move markets, it raises concerns about fairness and transparency.
So you're saying my tweets aren't doing that?
Yeah.
Shocking. Okay, so we've got public image business dealings, legal trouble, but there's also this whole other thing. His treatment of employees.
Right. The working conditions at Tesla and SpaceX, they've been under a lot of scrutiny. Elon's created this ultra-hardcore work culture, long hours, extreme dedication, pushing yourself to the limit.
But is that sustainable? I mean, Burning people out doesn't seem like a good strategy.
That's what people are saying. And there's evidence it might not be. High turnover rates, employee burnout, even safety concerns at the Tesla factories. Remember that worker who got his leg crushed on the assembly line?
Yeah, that was awful.
And then there's Elon's response to unionization efforts. He's very anti-union. There are allegations he's trying to prevent workers from organizing.
Like he sees worker empowerment as a threat.
It's a possible interpretation.
Yeah.
And it makes him look anti-worker. Not a good look for someone building the future.
So we're seeing a pattern here. Questionable behavior, legal issues, labor concerns. And all this is happening while he's pushing for a sustainable future.
Exactly. And that leads us to another layer of complexity, his environmental claims and the criticism around them.
Because on one hand, he's all about electric vehicles and renewable energy. But on the other,
There are inconsistencies and accusations of greenwashing, like with Tesla. They've been accused of exaggerating their environmental benefits while downplaying their carbon footprint.
like, what do you mean by exaggerating their benefits?
Well, for example, electric cars themselves don't have exhaust pipes. But the batteries are a different story. Making those batteries creates a lot of emissions. And those aren't always included in their environmental assessments.
So it's about the whole process, not just the car.
Right. And then there's Elon's own statements on climate change. One minute he's calling for urgent action. The next he's downplaying the issue. It's confusing and undermines his credibility.
Like he wants to be a climate champion.
Mm.
But also appeal to those who deny it.
Right. And that can backfire. People start to wonder if he's sincere or just using it as marketing.
Because we've got a lot here. Questionable behavior, stock manipulation, labor issues, environmental concerns. And this is just the beginning.
We've only scratched the surface. In part 2, we'll look at the consequences of all this and explore the legal battles Elon is facing. So we're back and ready to dig deeper. Last time, we started to see how Elon's actions have these really big consequences. Not just for him, but for his companies, too. And maybe even for the whole world.
Yeah. The more you think about it, the bigger those ripple effects seem. We talked about how his behavior is hurting Tesla's image, but could there be like more concrete damage beyond just bad press?
Oh, definitely. You have to look at the financial side, too. If investors start to lose confidence in Elon, Tesla's stock value could plummet. They might not be able to raise capital as easily. Invest in research and development. It could really hurt their ability to compete.
And Tesla's been like the leader in electric vehicles. If they start struggling, does the whole movement slow down?
It's a real possibility. Tesla's been a big motivator for other car companies. If they falter, it could have a ripple effect.
Okay, so that's the financial side. But what about the legal stuff? Those lawsuits aren't just going to disappear.
Not likely, no. All those lawsuits over his tweets, the accusations of stock manipulation, the investigations into Tesla's safety practices, those are serious legal battles. He could end up facing huge fines or settlements, even criminal charges theoretically.
And that would affect his position at Tesla and SpaceX,
Yeah.
right? Like, could he even stay CEO if he's found guilty?
It's definitely possible if a court finds him liable for something, especially financial misconduct. He might be forced to step down. Can you imagine the fallout?
It's hard to picture Tesla or SpaceX without Elon.
But it's a real possibility.
And it's not just about those companies. His actions affect society as a whole.
That's a really important point. Elon has this massive platform, millions of people hanging on his every word. He can influence public opinion-shaped narratives and inspire people to take action. But that kind of influence is a double-edged sword.
He can use it for good or bad.
Exactly. On one hand, he's pushing for innovation, a sustainable future. He's inspiring engineers and entrepreneurs, but then he also normalizes impulsiveness and recklessness and this disregard for consequences.
And that could trickle down to his followers. They might think his behavior is okay to copy.
It's a real concern. It shows how much responsibility comes with that platform.
Yeah.
What he says, what he does. It has a big impact on how people think and act.
So what's the lasting impact of all this? Is he pushing us towards a better future or just creating more problems?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's not black and white. There are so many nuances and unintended consequences. And speaking of complex situations, let's talk about Twitter, or X as he calls it now.
Yeah.
It's become this case study in how one person can reshape a global platform with huge consequences. His whole approach to content moderation, his belief in absolute free speech, it's created a breeding ground for misinformation and hate speech.
And I read somewhere that their revenues plummeted since he took over. Is that true?
Yeah, a lot of advertisers have pulled out. They don't want to be associated with a platform that's seen as toxic and unreliable.
And what about the users? How has it affected their behavior?
Studies have shown an increase in hate speech and harassment. especially against marginalized groups. Fewer content moderation staff. Plus, Elon's own inconsistent enforcement of the rules. It's created this chaotic environment
Huh.
where it's hard to tell what's real and what's harmful.
So basically, he's made it a free-for-all.
Oh, that's one way to put it. He claims to be a champion of free speech, but his actions prioritize a certain kind of speech, often at the expense of those who are already silenced.
And making X a private company doesn't help. There's less transparency, less accountability.
Exactly. It's hard to track what's going on. To hold them accountable for misinformation and harmful content, it's like a black box now.
It feels like he's playing with fire, not just with the platform itself, but with online discourse.
And that brings us back to the question of his legacy. Is he a visionary or a reckless individual?
Yeah. It's hard to say. We've talked about the companies, the lawsuits, the societal impact. But what about Elon, the person? His relationships, his family.
You're right. It's easy to focus on the big headlines, the business deals, the technology. But we can't forget about the human side of things, the people whose lives are affected by his actions.
Like his daughter Vivian, who legally changed her name and distanced herself from him. That's got to be painful.
It is. It shows that even the most brilliant minds can struggle with basic human relationships. It makes you wonder about the cost of his ambition, the toll it takes on those closest to him.
So we have this really complex picture. Brilliant and reckless, innovative and destructive. Inspiring, but flawed.
It's hard to know what to make of it all.
Yeah.
And that's why these conversations are so important. We need to look at the nuances and challenge our assumptions and try to make sense of it all, because Elon's story isn't just about him, it's about all of us.
Okay, so we've really gone deep on Elon, explored his companies, the legal stuff, the impact on society, even his personal life. It's a lot to process. Honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all.
I get it. It's a wild ride. Elon's story is like this high-speed roller coaster through the future of tech and humanity. He's pushing boundaries, challenging everything we thought we knew, making us face some uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Yeah, like he's holding up this mirror,
Yeah.
showing us our potential and our capacity for self-destruction all at once.
Exactly, and I think that's why people have such strong reactions to him. He's this paradox of progress and disruption. We're drawn to his ambition, his big ideas, but then there's the ego, the impulsivity, the disregard for consequences.
So is he a hero or a villain?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer.
So how do we even begin to make sense of it all?
Well, I think we have to recognize that Elon is a product of our times. He reflects our obsession with tech, our love of disruption, this belief in the lone genius who can fix everything.
But that kind of thinking can be dangerous, right? We end up blindly trusting people who might not deserve it.
Absolutely. We need to be more critical, more discerning, more willing to question authority, especially in the tech world.
So that includes Elon.
Of course, we can admire his accomplishments, his drive to innovate, but we also have to hold him accountable for his actions, his words, the impact he has. We can't ignore the negative consequences just because he's making cool cars and rockets.
It's not about waiting for him to save us or destroy us. We have a role to play in shaping the future.
Exactly. We have to engage in these tough conversations, question our assumptions, challenge the narratives, and demand more from our leaders and from ourselves.
Because the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it through our choices, our actions, our values.
And those choices have consequences. We're seeing that with Elon in real time. His decisions, his words, they're shaping the world.
So what's the biggest takeaway for you? As someone who's really dug into this whole story.
I think the most important thing is to stay engaged. Be informed, be critical, question the narratives you're hearing, challenge your own assumptions, and hold those in power accountable.
Because we're all creating the future together.
That's right. And it's a responsibility we can't take lightly.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive. I'm feeling a mix of hope and worry. Hope that we can learn from Elon's story and build a better future. But also worried about what happens if we don't.
I think that's a perfect way to sum it up. It's not about worshiping or demonizing Elon. It's about understanding the complexities, the challenges he represents, and using that understanding to guide our own actions.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, keep digging, keep questioning, keep exploring. Because the journey of discovery is just like the future itself, full of twists and turns and endless possibilities.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.